Madam Chair, if you're ready, we can begin.
Thank you, Helen. We will be calling this meeting, calling to order at 6:35. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Polachek,
Present.
let the record know that Commissioner Polachek will be sworn in momentarily. Commissioner Isaac,
Here?
Commissioner Block, Vice Chair Milan,
Present.
Chair Torres.
Here.
Let the record note that Commissioner Sanan is not in attendance.
Great. Since we're going to be swearing in Commissioner Polachek, I would love for her to join us, or actually lead us to the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you, Commissioner. And now I would like to invite Helen to give the oath of office to our new commissioner.
Okay, if you could repeat after me. I, Elaine Polachek,
I, Elaine Polachek,
do solemnly swear that while serving in the office as a member of the Public Facilities Commission
do solemnly swear that while serving in the office as a member of the Public Facilities Commission
of the City of West Hollywood,
of the City of West Hollywood,
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All right. Here is your actual certificate. There you go.
Welcome, Commissioner. Okay, now we're going to move to the approval of the agenda of the meeting of May 8th.
Chair, if I may, I think we left off item 6, which would be commissioner comments early on. If we want to do that.
Are we allowed to go ahead and add that?
Prior to approving the agenda, you can add that item, yes. It's not an item
Thank you.
of action. It's not an action item, so therefore you could add it.
I move that we adopt the agenda with the addition of, in item 6, adding commissioner comments early in the evening.
All in favor?
Aye.
No abstentions? Okay, great. Thank you. And now we're going to be looking at the minutes from March 13, 2019. We just need the approval of that.
Thank you. Yes, I'll approve the minutes of the last month's meeting.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain. I wasn't present.
Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to be moving to public comments. We have several speakers, so welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Our first speaker is Elaine Morrison.
Hello. My name is Elaine Morrison.
Ma'am, just a point of clarification. Did you want to speak now in public comment, or did you want to speak on the item 8A? 8A. 8A, okay.
So I will be moving the speaker comment to 8A. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Madam Chair. I think we didn't have that information at
Thank
that
you.
time.
Excellent. I appreciate that clarification. Looking forward to speaking to you, Ms. Morrison. Okay, now we have a public comment by Kathy Blivus. Hopefully I said that right.
Good evening, Kathy Blavis, City of West Hollywood. Welcome to the new commissioners. It's kind of appropriate that I didn't hear my name called because that's kind of what I'm here to talk about. The other night at council, there was an item, a consent item with regard to extending a contract to Waveguide, the people who do the audio-visual. I'm just here to say that I am hearing impaired. Even people I know that are not hearing impaired have a hard time hearing in all of the community rooms, or at least most of the community rooms. I know that public facilities, I've spoken with Helen Collins. I know something is coming that's going to improve the matter. I'm just hoping that when this does happen, if the commissioners here at public facilities could make sure that if they're sitting in the back of the room, they can hear. If they're using a hearing device, that it's not positional. And I would like to also request that in the interim, until things are changed, if the one and only monitor with closed captioning could be raised a little bit so that if you're not sitting right in front of it, you can see it from the back of the house. So that's about all I have to say. It's not so much a complaint as it is a concern. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blivus. Next, we have Stephanie Harker.
Good evening. In fact, the sound is very low tonight. I'll try and speak up because I'm not known for being quiet. Good evening, Stephanie Harker, City of West Hollywood. Welcome to the new commissioner. And I just wanted to start by thanking all of you for Arbor Day. Thank the city for putting that on. It was a lovely morning, a little dreary, but still fresh and clean there in the park, at Laurel Park. You know, it does beg the question, though, why we have not been able to use that beautiful public facility for this year's 16 years. We've had 2 consultant groups hired over the years. We did 2 community visioning plans for the Weissman House, lovingly known as Tara. And still it sits slowly deteriorating. I know it's been mothballed, but now I hear we're going to mothball the mothball. So I just hope that all of you will speak to your council members and really see what we can do about using that. It's such a beautiful facility, and we could have been having weddings and teas and design houses and art shows, and yet it's basically neglected. Also on Hart Park, I've spoken to you and I've spoken to the Disabilities Advisory Board, I've spoken at the council, and yet Hart Park, a public facility in West Hollywood, I know that we lease it, I know that the contract is up with the City of Los Angeles, but I don't think the City of Los Angeles or the City of West Hollywood should allow that park to remain inaccessible to handicapped people, to the disabled, and it is. You know, there was a question about how much it would cost to do the repairs on it because of the slope. Anybody in a wheelchair or who has any mobility issues at all cannot make it down that hill and go to that park freely. We are in a building right now that when this park, West Hollywood Park, is finished, it will be $200 million park. It'll be great, but I don't want to hear you can't afford to make a public facility accessible to the disabled. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'd like to invite Richard and I think it's Maggio, sorry.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Richard Maggio, like Joe DiMaggio. I'm from West Hollywood. I've lived here all my life, and I'm here tonight because I am your liaison from rent stabilization. And periodically, I will be bringing you some of the rent issues so that you stay on top of what is affecting the city and our housing stock and some of the new laws and regulations that are brought before us so that we could go out into the public and help to explain those issues. Also, I will be bringing back many of the issues that you bring up, because I think we all should be informed no matter what commission we are on. We are all part of this wonderful city, and that's what we should be doing, getting out there and getting the word. And remember, we're all ambassadors for the city, so I'm looking forward to coming here. I sit here as well, and it's an exciting place. I wish you could be televised all the time. It's a great feeling. It adds great importance to your role, and it's a wonderful way to get the word out, and there's no better way than TV. Thank you very much.
And I did notice that you wanted to speak on behalf of the item 8A, so my apologies. If you want to speak again, you're more than welcome to do so, okay?
Speak on,
The agenda item number 8A.
speak on that as well?
You can at the time that we're speaking on regards to that item.
On 8A.
Yeah. But not now. What I noticed is that you are actually wanted to speak on behalf of 8A. So if you want to, you can speak to at that moment too.
Did you submit 2 speaker
I
slips?
do want to speak.
Oh,
Okay.
I
So when that
understand. So I
item-
have, okay.
Would you prefer me to do it now or later?
You would do it later when we have the item.
So then I'll keep it with the, got it. Okay, great. Thank you. Aha, now I see what's happening.
May I just make a request? I'm hard of hearing also, and it would be great if you could put your face a little bit closer to the microphone so that we can hear. Can you all hear me? Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, great. Now we're going to be. Okay. Have any commissioner comments?
Chair, if I may. I just want to start off by thanking staff and liaisons from the city for, I think, executing a fantastic Arbor Day. We planted 4 new trees at Laurel Park. I think we had a good time doing it, and I know a few of the members of the audience attended as well, so thank you for coming. I think going forward, one of the suggestions that I received on Saturday of last was we can do a better job promoting this, and I know Laurel Park's difficult because of parking, but in the future, maybe picking a park with a little more parking, and also inviting kids. I think it would be a great opportunity to invite some students who are local who would want to participate with us. It may open up the community more and invite more people to participate. So thank you very much for doing that. And I just wanted to echo the earlier comments about Laurel Park and Wiseman House. It would be, I know we've had a couple of updates over the last year, but maybe next year we could, I should say, going into the summer might be a good idea if we can get another update and possibly even put together an ad hoc committee if that's something that would be under our purview to explore where we currently are and then report back to the full commission.
And I can provide a brief update during staff comments.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner Block?
Welcome, Commissioner Polachek, and I'm sorry, Chair Torres, you'll need a pen for this. I have 3 adjournment motions. If we can adjourn tonight in the name of Bill Ash, Cliff Wadama, and Scott Miller. It was a rough month. And finally, Stephanie Harker's comment about Laurel Park, we should agendize that item and have a full discussion as to where we left off. Most of the commissioners are new. They weren't at the visioning process, and we should have a full update from where we left off and really see if we can kind of motivate something to happen there. Instead of just an update, maybe we can have a full agenda item and invite the public to participate again. And that's it.
Just a point of clarification on that, the Laurel Park process is currently not under this commission, so therefore agendizing an item on the Laurel Park may have to come at a later time, but I'll provide further clarification during staff comments.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, I'd like to welcome Commissioner Polachek as well and say that I had a great time at the Arbor Day planting. I planted a whole tree with one other person, and it was a lot of fun. I honestly didn't think it was going to be so much fun, but it really was. So I encourage everybody to try to get out there and participate, because it is fun.
Thank you, Commissioner. I unfortunately was not able to be there, but I was there in spirit. I had a training that made me be away, but I saw all the pictures, and I'm really proud of the commission and as well as the staff. Everything that you put together. For our commissioner, vice chair does say that there are some room for improvement, but thank you for all your energy and time that you put in. Okay, so moving on, we don't have anything on the consent calendar nor the public hearings. And now we've moved to new business. Would you like, Helen, to have our speakers first and then, or have the public speakers first?
All right, normally we would have staff provide their presentation, and then in turn it would be the public speakers would come up, and then the commission would have discussion.
Excellent.
So I'd like to introduce Bianca Siegel, the Long Range Planning Manager, and Garen Yules, Associate Planner. They'll be providing a presentation for, or basically an update this evening on the pilot project that they've brought to you initially prior to the project starting. It's all yours, Garen.
Thank you, Helen. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Garen Yules, as Helen mentioned, and we're with the Long Range Planning Division within the Planning and Development Services Department in the city. We're here tonight to give you an update on the Sunset Streetscape pilot project, which I know that there was a lot in your packet with regards to this item, so I'm going to try to summarize it in this presentation, and I'll try to go as quickly and efficiently as possible. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background on the project. Back in November of 2016, the City Council directed various departments, Economic Development Department and the Planning and Development Services Department, to study the Sunset Strip with regards to looking at the streetscape, understanding how certain areas are doing, are there opportunities to improve walkability on the strip, looking at the entertainment industry and how we can spur that through economic development initiatives, and then identifying opportunities for public and private investment on the strip. And the ones bolded were directed at our division. Next slide. And then in December 2017, Economic Development did present a report on entertainment opportunities for the strip. At that meeting, the City Council directed long-range planning to move forward with designing and implementing highly visible prototypes on the strip that are very tangible. They can be used by the people and to test out ways to improve walkability. So in May, we took a contract to the City Council in 2018, and we partnered with Gale Studio to develop the project. Next slide. So the project scope had 3 major components. The first was to develop the prototypes. There are 3 pilot projects, and they're meant to improve walkability, test out ways to make it more comfortable for people on the strip. The second component is the development of a street life action framework plan. The first part of that are key takeaways and recommendations for the pilot projects, in which you have that report in front of you today. And the second component of that is recommendations for more long-term actions in other areas of the strip. And finally, the third component of that scope of work was the development of really conceptual design options for the east and west gateways on the Strip. Next slide. So the first part of the project, once we kicked it off, was a public life study. Before the implementation of the pilot projects and the design of the pilot projects, the consultant team and staff conducted analysis to look at various things like counting people moving on the Strip, mapping stationary activity where people are sitting, both public and private spaces, conducting intercept surveys, and mapping the quality of public space on the Strip. So that included us being there for 3 days from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m., really looking at how people are using space on the Strip and how they're moving around. Next slide. So this is a summary of some of the public life findings based on that report that's included in the detailed report with your packet. Just to summarize, we looked at average pedestrian counts per hour. The top one looks at pedestrian counts per hour on Sunset overall in the first column. The second column looks at counts at the Sunset Plaza, which have higher pedestrian counts. And then we looked at a 24-hour period of vehicular counts as well. And the bottom row shows comparison to Santa Monica Boulevard. We noticed that there's a very similar vehicular volume traffic with Santa Monica Boulevard and Sunset. The pedestrian numbers, both overall on Santa Monica and focused in the Rainbow District area, are significantly larger. So that kind of indicates that there is possibility with higher vehicle volume traffic to have a really vibrant pedestrian environment as well. Next slide, please. A second finding we noticed is there are really few people who cross Sunset, north and south. It's about 1 to 3. Most of the pedestrian traffic that occurs is really east and west traffic. Next slide. So then we went into the design of the pilot projects. And the goal of the projects is really to communicate the value of looking at ways to improve walkability, to test out ways to make Sunset more comfortable, and as a tool to really generate community feedback, in which we got a lot, and that was the goal of the project, is to really start the dialogue with the community about how we can look at ways to improve walkability. Next slide, please. So I'll go through the 3 pilot projects really quickly. The first one are the temporary bulb outs, and they're a combination of paint, planting, some softed bollards. They're not meant to be permanent, so what you see right now are kind of the temporary nature of trying to test out how they're being used, both how comfortable they are for pedestrians as well as how vehicles are navigating around those as well. Next slide. So these bulb outs were concentrated on the western end of the Strip near Sherborne Drive through San Vicente, and there are 5 intersections. And then the next few slides just go through some quick images of those, so we can just kind of go through them every few seconds. All right, and the second pilot project was a parklet. It was installed across from our beloved Book Soup, and so that one removed one on-street loading space, and we added another loading space to help with that, and created really a shaded area for people to sit, read a book or a magazine, take a short break, and really provide some much-needed public seating in that vicinity. And then I have, again, some photos. We can quickly go through those as well. Thank you. And it included a little free library as well that was incorporated in that, and it's been really popular among the community. And finally, the third pilot project was what we call the Connective Sidewalk Trail. This was really meant to figure out ways to create a common identity from east to west on the Strip. So this particular pilot used light poles. We wrapped them with bright colors and then included colorful posters with rich information about the history of the Strip, as well as some pedestrian wayfinding to get people to know that a 3 minutes north, you can actually go to another cafe or a restaurant. And then in addition, it included clusters of public seating where we put in various locations on the strip. There were 21 public seats that were added with this pilot. And then I have pictures again, so we can quickly go through that. Thank you. There's the historical posters that were part of it, and then some of the public seating. So the pilots were installed early December, and between the then and today, staff has evaluated the pilots through various methods. Our public life survey, we conducted the same survey after the implementation of the pilots. We also posted an online survey, the city's official survey. We held a community meeting in March to also hear from the community about the pilot projects and their feedback as well. Additionally, there was a survey that was released by the West Hollywood Heights Neighborhood Association, and that was given in attachment C of your staff report as well. Next slide. So I'll quickly go through some of the public life findings post-implementation of the pilot. So the first one, the bulb outs. Our surveys indicated around 54% of people felt safer because of these that were implemented. 57% noticed improved walking environment. The increase in pedestrian numbers with the implementation of these was minimal and might be circumstantial, but there was sentiment towards walking on the strip and that it has improved. And then in addition, there was an increase of 10% of people walking. On the right-hand side, we do have some data we collected from the Sheriff's Department in terms of collisions, both between vehicles and pedestrians. Before the pilot, there was 4 vehicle and pedestrian collisions in the pilot concentration area, 1 vehicle and bicycle collision, and then after the pilot, there were only 7 vehicle collisions. So there was a significant reduction. There were no pedestrian collisions, and that was kind of the reason why we clustered these bulb outs in that particular area. Next slide, please. And then with this pilot, we did make adjustments early on in the project to respond to community feedback, to make it easier for vehicular flow. And to summarize some of the feedback, both in our survey and then in the other survey, there were concerns about motorists' inconveniences, especially making difficult turns with some of the bulb outs as well. And then there was also a lot of commentary on aesthetics. These are temporary, so that's subjective, but there was a substantial amount of comments on that. Next slide, please. So the parklet, based on our surveys and analysis, 80% of people called the parklet a satisfactory experience. There was comments on adding more flexible seating there to allow people to use it in different ways, having more softer seating, and then more public seating closer to building faces. The parklet did add 15 public seats, and our surveys of pedestrian counts did show a 20% increase in people sitting on public seating. So that's different than private seating, which is a cafe outdoor dining seating. Next slide, please. And then finally, the connective sidewalk trail, the 75% supported, keeping the historical posters or looking at ways to make that a little more of a permanent fixture. The 21 public bench seats that we implemented across the strip, we noticed a 43% increase in people sitting in public versus in a private space. Next slide, please. So now I'll quickly go through our recommendations, and the first one are the bulb outs. This is a map showing what's there now, and then staff is recommending the removal of 4 temporary intersection bulb outs. The first one is at Sunset Horn, the 2 bulb outs. Second one are the 4 bulb outs at the intersection of Sunset and Larrabee, and the third one is the southwest corner of Sunset San Vicente, and the 4th is the bulb out at the Sherborne crosswalk on the south side. Next slide, please. And then here are recommendations for making certain ones that we noticed that had a significant impact in improving crossing distances and helping pedestrians cross better in these particular locations. They include the crosswalk at Holloway and Palm. This crosswalk has also been identified as a priority by the City Council in the pedestrian and bicycle mobility plan. So we're recommending adding in-road flashing lights at that southern crosswalk and the crosswalk at Holloway, and then also converting the bulb outs to permanent concrete extensions. The bulb out next to the parklet, we are recommending converting to a permanent traffic paint with reflective posts to allow for cyclists to move through that area, transition to Holloway, and then to add a little more flexibility while still making cars be a little more cautious as they're making that right turn onto Palm. Number 8 shows the traffic median at Sunset and Holloway. That has been very successful in really shortening that north-south crossing distance. We are recommending converting that into a permanent concrete traffic median, potentially expanding that with landscaping as well. Number G, the northeast corner of Sunset and Clark, across from the Whiskey A Go-Go, we are recommending making that a permanent extension. That area gets really popular and busy, especially around nighttime when there's tons of people queuing near the nightclub, and we think adding that additional extension would not only shorten that north-south crossing distance, but also add additional space for pedestrians as they're spending time in that particular area. And finally, number J, we are recommending the relocation of the Sherborne Sunset Crosswalk to the east side of the street to allow for vehicles more visibility for vehicles as pedestrians are crossing, to add in-road flashing lights in that particular area as well, and then add the corner extensions as permanent concrete extensions with the addition of the median island. This crosswalk has also been identified as a council priority in the ped and bike mobility plan, so it was already a project that our engineering team was going to be looking at. And
I just wanted to point out for members of the audience that if the map is a little hard to read, it's also attachment B in the staff report. If you have a printed copy of that, it's attachment B of the staff report.
And so thank you. The plan is that all of the intersections will, the ones that we're planning to remove will be removed immediately. The ones that are going to be converted to permanent, we'll remove what's there now and replace them with white traffic striping and reflective, in-ground reflective markers. So they will be changed to a more kind of permanent traffic extension, but eventually, once funding is identified, the ones that are slated for permanent concrete would be changed. Next slide, please. For the parklet, we are recommending the maintenance of the parklet for additional 6 months. Book Soup may assume the long-term maintenance responsibilities. We've been hearing a lot of positive feedback on that particular prototype, and we would like to keep it for an additional 6 months for further evaluation and to figure out the maintenance responsibilities as well. And we'd like to engage with some interested businesses who have reached out to us since the opening of the parklet, that on Sunset, they also would like to entertain the possibility of having one as well in front of their business. Next slide, please. And then finally, in the connective sidewalk trail, those were really meant to be temporary. The vinyl wraps don't last as long, so we are recommending removal of the wraps and the posters. We will be recommending the maintenance of the public benches and seating. Those were of really high quality, so we think continuing to maintain those in the public right-of-way have substantially improved people having an opportunity to sit in a public place. And then finally, the development of a more permanent strategy to highlight the rich history of the Strip, in addition to adding some of that pedestrian wayfinding that have been really well received. Next slide, please. And next steps, we will be taking the same update to the Transportation Commission on May 15th, and we'll be taking our staff's recommendation to the City Council on June 17th. We will be working on the other part of the Street Life Action Plan, which are the long-term solutions and recommendations for the strip, and we're anticipating taking that to the City Council in August or September of 2019. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. I appreciate that. May I take the speakers first before we have questions from the commission? If that's okay, or would you rather ask questions first?
I wanted to clarify one thing. You mentioned that there were, the update to the program, originally there were 4 traffic accidents and 1 pedestrian accident, and then after the program was put in, there were now 7 vehicular accidents. It almost doubled due to these bulb outs in this pilot program. Did I hear that incorrectly?
No, so if we can go back to that, let me get that slide open. So before the implementation of the pilots, there were 15 vehicle collisions, 4 vehicle and pedestrian collisions, and 1 vehicle and bicycle collision. Following the pilot, between November to April, there were only 7 vehicle collisions. So there was a reduction. There was no reported vehicle and pedestrian collisions following the implementation of the pilots.
And my second question, just on the basis of the whole survey, the demographic said, what, 62% male. That doesn't, how does that represent a real demographic analysis of what's going on? Is Sunset Strip 62% male versus female? Are females more apprehensive about walking on the street, or, you know, with strollers or stuff?
So those were observed through our pedestrian counts, who's crossing the street, and then also through our intercept survey. When we were out there surveying, that was the demographic mix that we noticed.
But the purpose of these is to create more visibility for cars. And the ones that we were taking out, especially Sunset Larrabee, I mean, that seems to be a very tough curve there. Get a lot of complaints about that particular one. What other bulb outs have had the most complaints?
So the majority of the bulb outs were the north bulb outs at Sunset and Horn, and then also the bulb outs at Sunset Larrabee. And so those were the ones where if we had to make additional modifications, it would really reduce the effectiveness of helping pedestrians. So we would not recommend keeping those as permanent. The Sunset Larrabee bulb out, our engineering team has implemented something called a lead pedestrian interval that allows a 4-second head start for pedestrians to do the north-south crossing. That also has been implemented at Santa Monica and Sweetser across from City Hall. So we think there are other solutions that could be looked at, but not necessarily, bulb outs may not necessarily be the right solution.
There were a number of recommendations named in the neighborhood survey, and I'm curious what happens to those. Do those fall by the wayside, where the majority of complaints about improving the Sunset Strip were about cleaning the sidewalks? That was so dominant in the requests of how we can move forward with that versus bulb outs or some of the other approaches that we're taking.
Yeah, sure. Additional issues that were raised in the neighborhood survey as well as in the city's survey work, such as sidewalk cleaning, are outside the scope of this specific project. So we're not making recommendations about things like sidewalk cleaning within this specific effort, but certainly the documentation of those concerns is useful and will be shared with.
Do they come back at a later date as part of this, as part of an improvement to the Sunset Strip? Do they come back at a later date and get addressed?
Yeah, we'll acknowledge some of those concerns in the second part of this, which is the long-term broader strategies for this strip as a whole, and might make some suggestions in those areas at that time.
There was one comment that I thought was very interesting. It was talked about all the developments on Sunset and how they are basically dominating the sidewalk, and the shiny portion of that is creating heat down below. And, you know, if that is a fix, then everything we're doing is not going to help much if those reflective, you know, particles are beaming down on the people.
Sorry to interrupt. Commissioner Block, if I may, we have several speakers that may give us some feedback on what they
Okay.
think that might be helping, not helping.
Okay,
And
great.
then if you have any further, we can give more space for us to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. May I invite Elaine Morrison again to the podium? Thank you so much.
Hello. My name's Elaine Morrison. I have lived on Larrabee above Sunset for 31 years. I have seen this town grow. The bump outs for me, I'm so happy to hear that you're taking them away on Larrabee. We have the most traffic in the world here, and it's only getting worse with all the hotels and everything else that they're building, where we don't know where all this traffic is going to go. And you've taken away all our right-hand turn lanes by putting up those bump outs. So I'm very happy to hear that they're gonna go. I would also like to say that Richard and I had met with Oscar DeGardo. Yes, thank you. And we had talked about the pedestrians when they have to cross the street. And Richard actually had suggested putting the timer for them to walk out a few minutes earlier, which I see you guys have actually done, and I believe it is a fabulous, I think that's a great help for pedestrians. But I don't believe that any pedestrian should stand in the streets. We have very crazy drivers, and people seem to be so angry today that unless they're on the sidewalk, you could put ballads on the sidewalk and keep them back as opposed to putting them in the street. And the other thing I was going to say is that as far as seating on the strip, I think it's fabulous, but I think they should be back by a building, not out there by the sidewalk. Number one, the fumes are horrible. The traffic is too crazy, and we do have crazy drivers that run up on the sidewalk. And we've had accidents by Book Soup, by the bank that went up. Well, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago where someone died. And it was horrible. So you don't want them close to the street. The seating should be closer to the buildings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Morrison. And now, may I invite Richard Rothenberg, please?
I'm going to read this anyway for the record because it looks like you've addressed some of my complaints and issues. My name is Richard Rothenberg. I've lived with Elaine for 27 years on Larrabee, north of Sunset, and I experience that intersection every day. The bulb outs that were placed on Sunset Boulevard for a 6-month test was a completely ill-conceived project. If the bulb outs were placed there for a pedestrian safety zone to stand in, the planter boxes destroyed by cars and the bollards constantly being knocked over and off by vehicle traffic is proof enough that this is a pedestrian danger zone if you're standing in a bulb out. Pedestrians belong on the sidewalk, not standing in the street. If you want to improve pedestrian safety so they can cross the street, increase the walk sign by 5 seconds before the vehicle traffic gets the green light. This will give the pedestrian more time to cross the street. And I do thank you for that. The bulb outs also negatively impact traffic as you can no longer make a dedicated right turn from the curb lane. Now I have to make a right turn from the number 2 lane around the bulb outs, and when a pedestrian is in the crosswalk, I have to stop on Sunset, backing up traffic on an already heavily trafficked street. Often when I'm driving up Larrabee from Cynthia to Sunset, Larrabee at Sunset bottlenecks from the 2 bulb outs, and the car that cannot make the right turn as pedestrians are crossing Sunset backs up the northbound Larrabee traffic, and we have to go through another traffic light cycle. If the bulb outs were designed also to beautify and increase the Sunset Strip experience, 1, they are an absolute eyesore, and 2, the concept of the Sunset Strip of the 60s to the 80s is ancient history, as the real estate on Sunset Boulevard has changed the dynamics, as well as the high-rise projects that have been approved for development on Sunset Boulevard will change the landscape of our neighborhood forever. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Elise Eisenberg, please.
Elise Eisenberg, West Hollywood, a 32-year resident of the neighborhood West Hollywood
If you don't mind,
Heights.
get closer to the mic, please, so we can hear
Add in
you.
the mic?
Closer
Okay.
to the mic, thank you.
Okay, Elise Eisenberg, 32-year resident of Horn Avenue. There's an Yiddish expression my mother used to use that I think would very well describe this project. It's called unchkapachki, which is really what this project looks like on Sunset, with all of these poles all over the place and the bulbs out and the way it's painted. It's just such an ugly-looking project, and it made such a mess of Sunset. And if it was trying to make it more walkable, I mean, it was described as trying to make it easier for people to cross. Sunset is actually a very narrow street. When you compare it to Santa Monica Boulevard, which is really twice the width of Sunset, you don't see anything like this on Santa Monica to make it easier for people to cross. What they did was actually time the lights better, or put in the flashing lights. You don't see these poles in the street that make it so hard for people to turn left and right. And most of these poles were at the residential intersections where we couldn't get in and out. It wreaked such havoc and only slowed down the residential streets. Didn't do anything, and some of it was just to cross our little one lane. Our residential streets are barely 2 lanes wide. And the bulb outs really affected the 5 steps it takes to cross the residential streets, and had nothing to do with crossing Sunset. And the reason a lot of people weren't crossing Sunset is because there was nothing to do on the other side of Sunset. There were business offices or empty storefronts, or in fact, across a big empty lot. So the reason people weren't crossing back and forth to the street was not because it was because there's nothing to do over there. And on top of that, what's forecast for Sunset down the line is hotel development. So there's going to be construction for another decade. So there's going to be even less to do. So just the whole future of Sunset is in jeopardy. They're destroying the economy there. People are just going to be coming for hotels and then leaving. They're not focused on development to keep people staying on Sunset. And, they're looking for, activities to keep people on Sunset. Low street level cafes and storefronts are disappearing. So the future of Sunset is in jeopardy anyway. But I can't believe there's only 7 vehicular accidents, because everybody has been screaming about how dangerous these things are. I have been almost killed in my car several times. I wrote an email that I think is in your package about how when I was going north on San Vicente, I was in the middle lane, and the bus on that side swerved suddenly into my lane right in front of me. I had to slam on my brakes and swerve to the left, almost hitting the car on the other side of me, because the bus was trying to swerve around these poles. I don't know what was staying, if it's going to stay the San Vicente poles, or are they all going on all the corners? I'm a little concerned that some of these things are becoming permanent. You're talking about on Holloway and Palm. That's another area where the big trucks are swerving around.
Thank you. We have a timed and public.
But I really want to talk to you about what's going to be saved. We really have to discuss that further. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have Ann Goldman, please.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, commissioners, for volunteering. This is so important. And I thank you for your details, and I thank you for your detailed questions, Larry. I live on Horn 30 years as of April, and it has just gotten worse. I agree with everything that was said before. All of those cautions aren't just feelings. They are witnessed every day by the neighbors. Also, I am a woman who walks on Sunset from Horn in either direction, but specifically towards La Cienega for a mile, about 5 days a week, morning, afternoon, or evening. There are a lot of women on Sunset besides myself, so if you only got men, then your survey is really inaccurate. I didn't know until I spoke with Elise really what it was that I've been dealing with for 6 months. I thought this was a quasi-art project. It is so poorly executed. How can you have barriers that are below the hood of your car? These little white things, people have no idea what they are. They're almost designed to be run over. Those little bubbles, the red paint on the pavement is like, you don't know what you're looking at. Clearly, it is not a safety zone. So what I would also recommend for the corporation who's doing this, you need a name change so we can identify by the name of what we're looking at. I would suggest artful safety zones, but you need to call these creative safety zones or neighbor safety zones because they don't look like a safety zone, and in fact, they are not. At Horn and Sunset, I've seen so many people step out as though they were safe when I'm trying to make a right-hand turn going south on Horn to turning right on Sunset. People, this is very ill-defined. We've all been to Beverly Hills recently. How can we avoid it? What they've done there really needs to be a model for us. There is such clarity on Santa Monica Boulevard with their green and their white stripes and their bicycle signs on the pavement. There is consistency throughout Beverly Hills as to what you're looking at. And I think above all, we need clear graphics. We need a clear identification that these are safety zones. We have to take away the flower boxes because there's no reason for us. Do you know that the Ubers feel no problem in stopping on those single lanes? Now we only have one lane since the flower boxes and the bulb outs. Who thought of that? Really, that is a dreadful title. Why they were designed, bulb outs. It doesn't make any sense. I was almost killed the other day trying to cross on the crosswalk at Sunset Plaza where Armani used to be and the two driveways across from each other. A little to the east of the new casting director's zone. A woman sped up as she saw me enter the crosswalk and flipped me the finger so that I would step back. There is such aggression there from entitled people who are driving. So definitely on that crosswalk, you need flashing lights. And the other reason people don't cross on Sunset is because people do not stop. So you need a way of making it more visible.
Sorry, Ms. Goldman, we have the time is up on this. I apologize.
Please just extend the partition at Sunset and Horn to the other side of the light, because the partition and making it permanent is an excellent idea. They come around and then they V closer as we're turning to go north, and it becomes even more dangerous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I invite Richard again to our podium, please. Thank you.
Richard Maggio, West Hollywood, and I just recently moved to the east side. I grew up on Sunset Strip between Hilldale and Palm and lived on Horn Avenue for over 40 years. I'm happy to admit that. So I know Sunset Strip, and Elise is right. There's nothing like a Yiddish word that really defines this, and I think it's a Michigan idea. This is not, it works in a village. It doesn't work on Sunset Strip. The bulb outs are just horrendous. They've narrowed the turn. And if you drive a 5-speed stick shift like I do, I can't even really go up Palm anymore. It's kind of too dangerous. And I've slipped in my gears there because I can't really make the turn appropriately. I'd like to comment on the parklets. I like the idea of parklet, and I think we need more of them. I'm curious why we never really built and created the more on the triangle that is on Holloway and Sunset. I mean, you have a nice slice of land there. It is a bus stop, but it's filled with a variety of plants that really don't really serve any purpose. I think it could be a great place for benches and to read and to wait. And again, I think in general, think think the design is very makeshift, flimsy, and it makes it difficult to make the turns. And I don't know if you noticed, but the little seating array in front of tower, the umbrella was snapped and taken away pretty quickly. And so I think the emphasis really on Sunset has to be good sidewalks and good curbs. And with all the new development, creating all that new setback, you're starting to get that on Sunset. And I think that's the way we should create it. This area is very narrow, and I think it should be left alone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers. It is important for people from the community to come and talk and let us know what needs to be improved. So we appreciate that. Now, commissioners, if you have any questions, please go ahead and take the stand or comments.
Yes, I'd like to comment that I agree wholeheartedly that this project is dangerous. Just looking at photographs, I wouldn't even sit in a parklet next to a curb with the cars coming down the street as fast and as crazily as they do. I think pedestrian crosswalks are much more important, and signaling them. I live near Santa Monica Boulevard, and there's a pedestrian crosswalk, but there isn't the light, the flashing light. People just drive by, as one speaker said, she got the finger, I get the finger all the time. So we need pedestrian safety first and foremost. That's my feeling. Thank you.
Commissioner Polachek?
So I have a couple of comments. This is a pilot program, so pilots are an opportunity to test things out. One of the reasons that you have paint as opposed to something more stationary and solid is because it's temporary. Same with the bollards. And so I'd like to know what you anticipate doing on a more permanent basis to create what I thought was a good term, which is a public safety zone, or something that denotes what we're talking about. I think walkability relates to destination. So people will walk for exercise, and on different thoroughfares and different arterials, you have different mix of people walking. On Sunset, there's not really destination. People aren't stopping place to place. So it makes it more difficult to create opportunities to sit, for example. People sit in areas where they want to watch people. There's no real people watching on Sunset. Sunset, you're moving primarily. So that's something to consider as you think about why you have seating and where seating would be placed. Who's going to sit there? Another thing is on the parklets. I actually am a big fan of parklets. I was involved with parklets in Santa Monica. They've proved to be very successful. They are very expensive. So who's footing the bill for the parklets? Is the city paying for the parklet, the construction of and installation of the parklets? And then what are the maintenance costs that we're asking a business to shoulder? Because if those are considerable, you may have a harder time. I mean, Book Soup, I'm really pleased that they put their hand up and said that they would do it, but there are maintenance costs associated with it. If there's landscape, if there's policing, cleaning, that's on the business. So that's something to think about. I'm particularly concerned about the safety of actually crossing. So the timed light, the head start on the crosswalk I think that's a no-brainer. That we should actually be using that throughout the city. There are plenty of locations that would be helpful for. You've talked about in-pavement flashers. Those can be effective, less effective during the day. PED-activated overhead flashing might be something to think about because it's more visible. Also, did Gail look at the possibility of raising the intersections to make it to slow traffic and creating a more defined crosswalk? So there's a slight elevation rise. It's a raised curb, essentially. Not a ton of change in elevation, but it does tend to slow traffic and creates a safer walking environment for the pedestrians. And then lastly, about the trail. I know it was temporary having the posters on the light poles. They're very small. They were very small, so I'd be curious to know what they're thinking about more permanently. That execution didn't work, and the comments were, where's my licorice? They pulled off the signs. I walked it over the weekend, kind of up and down, and most of them were already gone. And again, it's temporary, I understand that, but there is a real opportunity to create a true trail where you create maps and you're taking people along Sunset and educating them about the history, about what happened there, points of interest. When you do these kinds of programs, surprise and delight are what people are looking for. How do you make a creative destination that people really like? And there's a gentleman by the name of Peter Kadigara. I'll get it for you. He's written a lot of books. It's For the Love of Cities is one of his big books. And he talks about the things that you can do to make a city really livable and interesting. And tourists come to places that are cool for residents. So this is about residents. This isn't so much about visitors. We should be making our areas really interesting for our own residents. And doing small things can do that. But it's difficult on Sunset because Sunset is a major arterial. People are going back and forth, east to west. So it's not like Santa Monica Boulevard. It's not even like Melrose or even Beverly, where there are more opportunities. And again, the point was made, people also are going to where there's a destination. What's the destination? How many stops can you have along the way? So just things to think about. I really appreciate the staff work on this, and I know Gale is a very good firm. They do a lot of work. Many cities are using them for placemaking, and that's what we're ultimately talking about, placemaking. So it's a good effort. There's a lot of refinement and things to take back to them to consider. So I thank you for all your work, staff.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Milan?
Thank you, Chair. I would echo that. I appreciate the staff work. I know you guys have been working a long time on this, so thank you for doing so, and thank you for bringing it before us. I know it's not completely within our purview, so I appreciate that. Couple quick questions. Who received the online survey? How was that disseminated?
Sure. So the online survey was posted on our project website following the pilot installations. The city also used our social media platforms to make people aware of that as well.
Do we know what the response rate was? Do we have any idea?
Yeah,
20%, 10%?
We received 152
51
responses.
respondents. Do we know how many it went out to, though? I mean, I know I received an email asking to participate. I was curious if we have any idea what response rate is. I know 20% is a really good number. 30 is a fantastic number.
We don't know that exact number. We also included we mailed out postcards to, I believe, 1,800 residents and businesses. So those people got notifications and a link to the survey.
Got it. For a population the size of West Hollywood, normally you'd want about just under 400 participants as a true sample size. And normally you're then trying to reach out to about 2,000 or just about 2,000 for a 20% response rate. I know we have a sample size of 151, 152. I'm a little concerned that we may be relying too much on the survey. I know there were 2 other methods that we did reach out for public comment. I think my bigger concern here is that are we making decisions without enough public comment? I think there have been a lot of very good comments made this evening, and I think we share them up here as well. I just want to make sure that we have done that properly and we're not rushing into making any long-term permanent actions at this point.
A couple follow-ups to your comments, which I appreciate. The survey, the online survey, was really sort of an extra supplement to the main portion of the study, which is the pedestrian counts and the intercept surveys, the sort of specific documentation of how people are or are not using the spaces on Sunset, and then the qualitative information that we're getting from the online survey and the input that we got from the neighborhood survey and those neighborhood conversations is used to sort of round out that understanding. But I want to reassure you we're not relying solely on that for any of the recommendations.
Right.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Block?
Well, there are three main issues on the Sunsets pilot. The first is the bulb outs, and I would think that those are the most controversial. And so I agree with staff's recommendations to eliminate the ones that you've decided to eliminate. On the ones that we've decided to maybe go forward with, I would rather recommend continuing the pilot program for future study. I don't. There are disabled drivers as well as disabled walkers. I'm a partially sighted driver who can drive during the day but can't see at night. That Larrabee one to go out, great. I use that all the time. It's awful. But there are other things that have come into light through the survey that also might address things that can help this program be successful if we're going to permanently do the bulb outs in certain areas. It could be the paint colors, it could be the planting, it could be the other recommendations that came in, including lighting. You know what I mean? Because I don't know that there's proper lighting. It's a neighborhood, so reflective lighting flashing on the ground, I don't know if a lot of neighbors would love that, but better lighting in these bulb outs might be. The second part is the parklets, and the first thing on the bulb outs. On the survey, the number one answer out of almost 200 people was they preferred none. None was the winner. Not that there was an improvement or it was better or worse. The number one answer was that they didn't notice anything. Oh, actually, yeah, that was, but on the, okay, so on the parklets, there's the 4 test parklet programs. So the staff report is asking for us to, maybe go forward with other businesses, encouraging businesses to open more. But we have 4 programs that we just launched that are, I'd like to, maybe catch up on the install dates and see how they're going, because those are test programs that the city donated, $25,000 for each person to open those parklets, and the city's actually covering those costs versus things. And the third thing that is the connective sidewalk trail with the history. That really scored well on the survey. It's something that I would personally like the best. And I think if we could mirror that kind of history, whether it be on the Sunset Strip or the Boys Town area or the east side by Plummer Park, and we can create this kind of historic zone with everything that happened in West Hollywood, that's a beautiful concept that could come out of this and go citywide. So I don't know that each of these each of them should be looked at as individual things that we might be able to roll out at one time versus, pushing all 3 at once, and see how we highlight them. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. Would you mind changing the recommendation to the after of what you're wanting us to recommend to the city council, the actual the image?
Madam Chair, the commission could make a motion. This is, their recommendation is for you to, I believe, provide input and feedback, but if the commission would like to make a different recommendation, they could make a motion to amend, or to make a recommendation.
I understand, but I want to see the actual image of what the removals
next slide.
are. This, just a slide, if you don't mind, on the screen. Thank you. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That one, yeah, thank you. So, commissioners, if you feel comfortable and you wanted to make a motion, I welcome you to do so.
I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to accept. I'd like to make a motion to accept the staff recommendation for the removal of the recommendations that were recommended, and on the ones that they want to make permanent, that we come back and revisit that, and we continue the pilot program till we can perfect what's permanent.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it for discussion. Because I have a comment.
Okay. So you're amending his
I have a question.
Okay.
Not
Clarification.
necessarily- So, a clarification. So, right now, it states that all intersections will be replaced with white traffic striping and reflective markers until funding is identified for permanent extensions at a later date. So, Commissioner, is that what your recommendation, your motion is to? Is in the new changes, that treatment would be the treatment that you would be requesting?
I'm not exactly sure of the language.
I'm just reading it off the bottom
Yeah.
of the slide.
You may, if staff can add,
organize
please.
that out.
Staff, is that what yours?
It is, yes. We're recommending replacement of the temporary red paint with traditional, in the locations that are specified to be retained, with more traditional white stripe, reflective white stripe traffic markings. Typically, that's done with a white edge stripe and diagonal markings throughout, and small, nearly flush reflectors that are on
Does
the
that make
edge of
them
that.
permanent, or are they still part of the pilot program?
Long-term temporary. It could become permanent. It's also easy to remove should it be decided that that's what's appropriate. But it lasts better and has higher visibility.
Are there any hazards that you identified that you made those choices to keep them and then add those conditions, or are there other things that you can add to make this, continue this program better besides just the paint color, reflective, or other things that, raising them a little? Somebody talked about the hood of the car. Are there other things that we would do so we can get to a permanent basis because they're really good?
Yeah, so the fully permanent basis would be to have concrete curbs, and that takes time and a lot more money to implement. And so our recommendation is that using traditional roadway striping to mark these locations would be the preferred mid to long-term option until there's an ability to do a larger construction project to implement permanent curbs. And in each case, those will be designed very closely in conjunction with our engineering team to make sure that they meet all expected standards for roadways and have all the appropriate safety features included.
That's why you're going to the public transportation on May 15th, or what's your next
The
stop?
Transportation Commission,
Yeah,
yes.
so, yeah.
They'll receive this same report.
Yeah, thank you. So if you would, Commissioner Block, are you comfortable doing the?
Is this accepting staff recommendations just for the bulb outs, or are we putting them all together with the parklets and the rest of the entire staff presentation?
I think it can be whatever the commission prefers. You're not, I think as Helen was saying earlier, you're not required to make a motion of support or of any of these, but regardless of the motion that's made, we will forward your comments along to the council when we make this presentation to them as well.
So if I may, and that's what I'm hearing, is that we have some comments to give and not necessarily a motion. Is that correct?
It sounds like we're really accepting staff's recommendation at this point.
But that's my question to all you commissioners.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah. So we're not necessarily making a motion at the moment. We're moving with the comments to move forward with the next upcoming meetings with the public transportation as well as the city council. Is that all in agreement? Question, Commissioner Block? Comment?
I don't know that we could use some transportation input too.
Which is why they're going to the public transportation. So maybe perhaps if you want to be a liaison, you can go to the public
Yeah, I could
transportation
do that. But because
commission
for us to
meeting.
recommend and go there like we've recommended it when we're really waiting to hear back from them before we really know how they feel. I don't
Exactly.
think we want to send it to them with our approval versus have it come back to us.
So staff is here to give us the information for us to give them comments. We're not necessarily making a motion at the moment.
And just a point of clarification, Commissioner Block, you are not sending your recommendation to the Transportation Commission. You are advisory only to the council, so therefore, whatever recommendations you make at this point, you could easily say, okay, we're going to make a motion to receive and forward our feedback. That would be a great motion. Therefore, we could move this item. And what Bianca and Garen would do is take all of the input provided this evening and provide that in the staff report to the council. Is that correct?
I think so.
So if you'd like to make a motion to receive and forward feedback as your recommendation to the city council, that would be a wonderful motion at this point.
Do I make the motion?
Commissioner Black, if you don't mind.
I'll make the motion to receive and file and
Receive and provide feedback to the council.
provide payback to the council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We
Aye.
would need to, I'm sorry, we would need to take a roll call vote.
Okay, great. Thanks, Helen.
Commissioner Polachek?
Yes.
Commissioner Isaac?
Sorry.
Commissioner Block?
Yes?
Vice Chair Milan?
Yes.
Chair Torres?
Aye. All right.
Thank
Staff,
you, Bianca and Karen.
yes, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to plan to come to the meeting and support you, as well as maybe have some comments. And thank you so much, community, for coming. We really do appreciate your feedback. Okay, great. Now we're moving to unfinished business, to the Urban Forest Management Plan. And we have a speaker today.
Okay, Madam Chair,
Yes.
this evening we have Scott Smith, our urban forests and landscape supervisor. Really hard to get on a business card, but he is here to answer questions, as well as Erin Hammett. She'll be answering any questions you might have. At this point in time, I'll give you a quick overview of the process that we've gone through to this point. This is actually the last stage, or the last section of the Urban Forest Management Plan that we need to have the commission review and provide recommendation to include it in the overall plan. This process started, I want to say, it seems like several years ago, but I think it's probably been a couple years ago, and for the commission and for staff, it's probably been about 3 or 4 years in the working. And we have brought in section by section to the commission for review and recommendation to put into the entire plan. At this point, we are, like I said, we're at the final stages. At your last meeting, when we addressed this item, I believe it was your February meeting, we brought the tree list. At that time, the commission had asked, could they receive more information on the individual species on the tree list that we were recommending. We sent out a very large file and a list and descriptions for the commission to review, and gave you an extended period of time to review that list. At this time this evening, we're here to, we can either move this item if you're interested in moving this item based on your review, or we can go ahead and provide a brief presentation on the tree list and then open it up for discussion. It is at the will of the commission at this point. Erin does have a presentation that she has prepared, so if you'd like to do that first and then open up for discussion, or we could move this item. It's totally up to the commission.
Commissioners, what are your thoughts?
I think that staff has done a pretty good job with this, and I think we've had a lot of time with the proposal. I know we've reviewed it over a couple of meetings. I'm happy to make a motion, and if it's seconded, there's a. So if there's a second, I'm sure there can be discussion that follows. I would move that we include the recommended tree species as part of the Urban Forest Management Plan to be presented to the City Council.
May I ask a question of staff?
Do we have a second? We need a second.
Do we have a second?
Seconded.
And now this is open for discussion at the moment.
I live in a flood zone on Huntley Drive, and when you go to get insurance, there's a lot of flood zones throughout West Hollywood. So my question is, in this urban forest management plan and the new trees that we're allowed to use on our property, I have 2 questions. One is, I think we discussed it's about 9,000 trees in the city that we have a full inventory of. And then there's these trees that were the new plantings that are on the recommended list. So I'm curious how many trees out of the 9,000 that we have in the city are already on this list, and how many trees really are not part of the new code to fit in, and where we're at in the percentage of our urban forest at this point. And then the second question, as we replace them with these, maybe less water-absorbing plants, how does it affect the flood zones in the city? When you're coming downhill in the flood, and is there the same absorption, and are there more plants that are better for our urban community or certain areas, so maybe you could help me with that.
Okay, so I can answer, as far as the percentages wise, I'd have to go and really research. But as far as in general, the answer would be that we've broadened the scope of the availability of the different tree species to plant. So basically, we really haven't removed, other than a few different trees from the planting palette that already exists. We've just expanded the basis to increase the city's diversity in the planting palette. And as far as having a successful urban forest, the key is in diversity, and to be able to plant different species and different types of trees in different locations. So in your situation where there's the flood zone or the high groundwater table, you know, we're into different species that are more drought tolerant, or that do awfully good, or they do well in that type of environment. So with certain species, or with the broad scope that we now have, we can plant a more suitable tree for the right tree at the right place.
I'd like to ask a question.
I looked up this urban management forest plan, and it's talked about having a tree board or advisory council as the recommending option towards that. Are we the tree board recommendation council, or do we have one of those? That are you the tree board council that came up with these plants? Like, who is to make an essential, urban forest management plan? You have to have an advisory board on these trees, and I don't know if that's us, or is that staff, or we don't really have it.
I can answer your question.
Thank you, Erin.
So at this time, the Public Facilities Commission does oversee the public trees of West Hollywood. That isn't your purview, so you would be considered that advisory board. Some cities also have a special group only overseeing trees, so that's just not how this city is set up.
And just a point of clarification, at some point in time, there may be a situation where we decide, as we develop our ordinance to become a Tree City USA, that we do set up a body that includes professional arborists and so on. And that's kind of the norm that other cities have done, is where they do have one, and it's made up of a non-quorum number of members of the Public Facilities Commission or the entire commission with an arborist. It depends. And as we start to work through our action plan of implementing the urban forest master plan, a management plan, then in turn we would be coming back to the commission with those individual items.
Commissioner.
One question: Does the city employ a tree inventory and mapping data management software program for
Yes.
our
Yes.
urban forest? We do.
We currently use Arbor Access, which is all the trees are geotagged, and we have I wouldn't say a 100% real time, but a very up-to-date inventory of all of our trees, and it's done through our tree trimming contractor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Block. Commissioner Isaacs, and then Commissioner Polachek. Thank you.
Thank you. My suggestion would be that the trees that are planted not be jacaranda type, any type tree that loses berries and loses petals to really mess up the sidewalks and the cars on the street, I think should be eliminated. I didn't see anything but the jacaranda, but I did see a bunch of berry trees. I don't know how to identify them, but I know in my neighborhood that the whole sidewalk is awash with squished berries. and they're not kept, the sidewalks are not cleaned often enough.
Commissioner Polachek.
So I apologize. I know the commission has done a lot of work on this, but I have a few questions, so I hope you'll indulge me. I wanted to ask if you've done an age and condition assessment of the urban forest?
There is an age and condition within the UFMP, yes.
Okay, so that's been done.
Well,
It's a future action item. So that would be in our near term. We want to do a canopy study and a condition assessment.
Yeah, that was my next question about canopy coverage.
Mm-hmm.
Because the urban forest, it's a renewable resource. You lose trees. This is an older city, so I'm sure we have a lot of mature trees, and it's important to replenish the urban forest and make sure that, as you mentioned, not only species diversity, but in diversity in age, so that all the trees aren't dying at the same time or subject to pests or disease. So I commend you. That's an important component. I want to echo Commissioner Isaacs in being concerned about any kind of leaf drop or berry drop. One, it makes a huge mess, and we already, as Commissioner Block stated, have issues with our ability to maintain our sidewalk infrastructure, just from a cleaning perspective. So anything that's going to create slip and fall hazards, something that you should look at. Jacarandas are an example, but there are others that have a lot of leaf drop or berry drop. I assume that you also looked at a combination of deciduous and non-deciduous trees so that we have that mix. So in the winter, people in California are always surprised. They think trees are dead, but they've actually just lost their leaves because they haven't grown up on the East Coast where all the trees lose their leaves. But just something to, as you continue to refine the urban forest master plan, that diversity of type of tree. I thought the palette was great. At some point, is there any thought to doing a street-by-street species, not only inventory of all your trees, but species inventories and replacement palette, so that you know once a tree goes, you know what species is going to replace it, so that you start to have some standards on each of the streets. I don't know if that's too much of an undertaking here. You've already done this, I know.
I know.
Erin.
It's so the closest near-term goals are the two items we just said: the canopy coverage study as well as the condition assessment, just to know our state of the forest. But after that, the prioritization planning would be next, and really honing into our best management practices.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the table. Could you please, Commissioner Milan?
Sorry, I move that our commission recommend, or excuse me, accept the recommendation made by staff to include the tree species in item, I guess it would be 9A, to be included as part of the urban forest management plan when adopted by the council.
Anyone second?
I second it.
Second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. No
We'll
abstentions.
need to do a roll call vote, I'm sorry.
Oh, roll call, please.
Sorry, the city clerk would like us to do a roll call vote. Commissioner Polchek,
Yes.
Commissioner Isaac,
Yes.
Commissioner Block.
Yes on this. I am disappointed that we employ this software, but we don't have the percentage of the trees that fall within this matrix, and maybe they can come back to us and tell us. If we have the software, we should be able to know the percentage of our trees that need to be replacement, because then we'd have a guide of even cost of it. But without that tool, I accept the trees that you recommend, but I think there should have been more information. But yes.
Okay, and Vice Chair Milan?
Aye.
And Chair Torres?
Aye.
And just a closing note, we will be bringing the entire plan back in the June meeting for adoption. And at that time, some of the items, the newer commissioners that were not part of the process, some of the items that you're discussing this evening may be answered in that presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, moving on to our annual tour of city facilities.
As you recall, we had to cancel our tour last month due to the lack of a quorum, because we're in transition with new commissioners coming on board. So therefore, we went ahead and canceled our tour, but to another date. At this time, we're coming back to see if the commission is interested in conducting the tour. I believe we had proposed it for the month of July.
There
And
were 3 suggested dates: July 13th, July 20th, or July 27th.
They're all going to be hot, so.
correct, and we normally do not have our tour in the summer months. So if the commission would prefer, we can move it to September, October timeframe. It is at the desire of the commission.
I will open it to everyone, and I have requests or a comment after you all. So, would July be okay with those dates, or you want to wait till September?
I would prefer the autumn.
Okay.
When it's cooler.
Okay.
That's fine, whatever works best for everybody. It's hard to coordinate a lot of people's calendars, so.
For the sake of trying to know what's happening with the parks, we've actually, and I apologize on my behalf that I wasn't there to be able to do that in April, but the sooner the better, I think. So we're able to move forward with Hart Park, with Laurel Park, and try to get more information on what's missing and what we're able to work on, rather than wait 3 more months. That's just my comment on that, but I'm happy either way.
Okay.
So if there is any dates that you're thinking in September, if you don't mind proposing, then that would be great.
We could table it at this meeting and bring it back to the next meeting. In the meantime, if the commission would like to give us some, dates, if the commissioners would like to send us some dates before the next meeting, when might work for each individual commissioner, then we can try to get a consensus and bring it back to the next meeting.
I'd suggest we table it, since Ty, I believe, will be back at our next meeting.
Correct.
It'd be nice to have his dates as well.
And we would have our new, I believe we're down 1 commissioner, so we would also, hopefully at that time, have the new commissioner on board.
Okay, great. So moving on to tabling that. Thank you very much. Now, excluded consent calendar. We don't have anything. And any more public comment? No. Okay. Items from staff?
Just a couple items, Madam Chair, thank you. In regards to Laurel, as some of the commissioners that have been on the commission for some time are aware, we as staff are not overseeing the Laurel project as it is moving forward. What I can do is I can go back to the group that is handling that project and see if they have any updates at this time. I do anticipate there's an item that could possibly be coming before the council in the near future on Laurel, and it might be best to wait until that item comes forward, and then in turn we could provide an update after that to the commission. At this time, we don't have any information to provide as an update, to be honest with you, on Laurel. In regards to Hart, I know that was mentioned earlier. We are in the process of finalizing the lease agreement with the City of Los Angeles. And we are also in the process of increasing our contract with our landscape architect to come back and revisit. We had, at one point, we had done an ADA study. It was a general overview ADA study. And we are in the process of increasing our contract with our landscape architect to come back and do a more broader study. We did just a kind of preliminary study, and also to update the. We also have a historic consultant that's also provided us a report, and we're going to be updating that for work we'll be doing to the house. So those items are coming up quickly, and as they move forward, as you may recall, the council had asked that the commission be actively involved in that, and we do have a Hart Park ad hoc committee. So as soon as we have a lease in place and we start moving forward with the studies, then we will be bringing the ad hoc committee out to address those items. And then also one other item, the Councilmember Meister is looking at doing a urban forest symposium to discuss the city's urban forest. I believe it's coming to the council in their next meeting, possibly. And at that point in time, we may be coming back to the commission and engaging the greening committee to provide support to that event. So I'll be coming back to you on that item. I think that was all the items that I had to discuss. I know the chair is participating in the activities this weekend, I believe.
And I can mention that on the
Okay, under your
commissioner.
comments.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if we have any administrative items at this point. So I think that's all on staff comments. Thank you.
If I may, and if you don't mind, I think I've mentioned this before, if anything happens to be bringing, if it's being brought up to the city council regarding Laurel Park or whatnot, if we're able to get notified so we can come and support when you're here, that would be great. Thank you. Any questions, commissioners?
Just a quick question. You said the lease, we're close to having one with the city of LA?
Yes, and we have to be close because it expires in December. We we initially had hoped to do an amendment to the existing lease. However, based on the way the city of LA's charter is written, they are requiring us to do a brand new lease. So therefore, we had to start from scratch again. Your chair was involved in that as well, and at that time we thought we were going to be able to amend the lease, but we are finalizing that between the two legal departments on the two cities right now.
Do we have a goal right now? Is there a month that we're aiming for?
I would hope within the next 60 days we would have completed the process.
Okay. And then the study, would that be delivered right around the same time, or do they need more time to do this study?
We currently have a pretty comprehensive study on the house. Of course, it would need to be updated because it was done a few years ago. The ADA study, we've been given direction to council to start working on that now already, so we are going to continue to progress on that one.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, thank you, staff. Items from commissioners. We don't have any subcommittees, so I will start with our new Commissioner Polachek.
Well, I want to thank my fellow commissioners for a warm welcome. This is a very interesting commission for me. It's in my wheelhouse. It's my background. I've spent 30 years working in public facilities, primarily for the city of Santa Monica, and now for Santa Monica College. So I'm very excited to be back engaged in West Hollywood. I've lived here for 31 years and had previously had more time to devote to my resident city, but now that I have a little bit more time, I'm delighted to be involved with you all and look forward to spending time learning and working with you. So thank you for a first meeting with you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Isaacs?
Yes, again, welcome. You also made some very good comments and asked very good questions, and I'm impressed, as did the other commissioners. And thank you again to staff for all of your hard work. I didn't make that clear when I fired off about pedestrian safety, when we talked about the parklets, et cetera, but I know that the staff did a lot of work on that, and I want to acknowledge it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Block?
I'd just like to thank the public commenters and the staff. Welcome, Commissioner Polachek. And tomorrow morning, there's a subcommittee meeting at Kings Road Park. If any residents have any questions about the park, I think they could stop by and ask any questions. And thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner Block. Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to commend you for hosting an excellent meeting. Thanks, staff, once again. A lot of work went into this evening, so thank you. Members of the public, our resident members of the public out there, thank you for coming. It means so much to us when there's someone out there. And those who remain to the end, we really appreciate it. Welcome to our new commissioner, Commissioner Polachek. Look forward to working with you. And lastly, when we do lock in a date for our annual tour, I hope we can promote that to the public so we can have a few join us on the bus. It should be a fun day, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to be copycatting all of your notes, and I do appreciate all of your work. Everyone, welcome, Commissioner Polachek. Thank you, staff, for all the work you do. Thank you. We cannot know what's needed in the community if people don't show up. So thanks for showing up and taking the time for being here. I wanted to invite everyone that's listening to come to the Women's Leadership Conference, which is happening on Saturday, May 11th, here at the City Council chambers. I'm honored to be part of the panel about how to become part of commissions or boards, which is going to be really interesting. It's at 2:45, which is at the second part of the day. As Commissioner Block was stating, we have a meeting at Kings Road Park, which I'm going to be really interested in thinking or seeing about it, and it's at...
We have a meeting tomorrow morning at 10:30, the Ad Hoc Playground Committee.
Yes, thank you.
For Kings Road Park.
Thank you. And if I may, on the adjournment, Commissioner Block, can you remind me who you wanted to adjourn?
Bill Ash, B-I-L-A-S-H, Scott Miller, Clifford Wadama. All of them with West Hollywood connections. One of them was there 20 years ago, 30.
Thank you. And now we adjourn at 8:15 in memory of Bill Ash, Scott Miller, and Cliff Wadama. Thank you very much.